joined now by somebody who's worked extensively at the BBC on so many well-known series, both in sitcoms, drama, light entertainment. So it's perhaps no surprise that he did come across Doctor Who 3 or 4 times during the course of all that. So I would like to introduce sound mixer and designer Michael McCarthy. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much indeed.
Well, I was perhaps wondering if you could start by explaining what studio sound is and what it involves from your point of view.
Right. I mean, just to explain the background, I joined the BBC a couple of years ago, in 1961, I think, in London, and we were only studio-based, which isn't true of other parts of the country. If people in Cardiff or people in Manchester, they would do studio sound, they would look after outside broadcast sound, and have a wider range of stuff. We were locked into our studios, and that was really for many years the majority of the work. As a studio sound mixer, I mean, from my point of view, the wonderful thing is that, I was going to say nobody cares, but that's not true. The production and the director, their main focus in any studio production, and probably in other productions as well, is on the performance from the artists and getting the pictures that they really require. As long as they can hear it, they're more or less happy, because they've got so much else to think about at the time. I mean, yes, afterwards, when they watch it, they will be much more critical of the sound. So from my point of view, we were and are very much left on our own to make the sound fit the mood of the piece, to give the atmosphere of the piece, and to make it as good as we possibly can. Because, as I say, on the day, there will probably be no mention. I mean, apart from the fact they might cut to somebody and all you get is, because you haven't faded them up, as long as a voice comes out when the lips move, that's what's required. And it's very much a team effort. In studios, and there's a lot more use of radio mics and stuff for chat shows and whatever now, but still situation comedies and the like, booms are used, which are the moving arm that moves over the set and it puts the microphone in front of whoever's speaking. So you're very reliant on having good boom operators, because however much you mix the faders, if the microphone is actually in the wrong place, it sounds as though it's in the wrong place. Yes, you can pull the level up, but somebody who you see a nice big close-up of their face, if the microphone's a long way away, they sound as though they're at the other end of a tunnel. So there are very much limits. So you do depend very much on boom operators. And the other element is somebody who is providing the music and the sound effects. Still to this day called gram-ops, because they used to play records on gramophones, but now it's naturally fully digitized, it's on computers, and it's all keyboards and mice. I mean, I started training on the studio floor, I became a boom op, I became a gram op, and then I started mixing. But as I say, the first contact is with the producer and the director, and you meet with them and talk about the program and the concept of the program. If it's a comedy program, then naturally you want to try and get the feeling of the comedy plus the enjoyment of the audience to the viewer at home. If the audience sound a long way away, it doesn't sound right. Why there's this distance of laughter going on? And very much so in the 70s and 80s, the feeling was you wanted the laughter to be right up the front, as though the viewer was sitting in the audience. And I must admit, if I listen to some of the stuff I did in the 60s and 70s, it is very much up the front and is probably not that acceptable these days. I mean, the Dad's Army audience is very close and very loud, but always the priority has to be that although the production want to hear the maximum audience, they must hear also, the viewer must hear all the words. Again, there's nothing more frustrating for people at home than not being able to hear the words, so that you get an enormous laugh, and unless you can hear the next line, I mean, it doesn't mean anything. Which is probably why some of the early stuff almost sounded so it was dubbed on, because I mean, part of the game, or skill, I suppose, was that you can't leave an audience faded up all the time, because there are acoustic difficulties. If you leave the audience faded up, it sounds as though all the actors are in a big cave. So you can only fade up the audience mics in the gaps. And so that you hear the next line, then you nip the fader back very quickly before the next line of dialogue starts, which of course makes the laugh sound very clipped, almost as though you have just plonked a laugh in there. But again, just trying to gauge when to come in and when. I mean, for me, that was the great fun about it. As all television has been, really, I've actually enjoyed the challenge of it, and trying to feel, or give the viewer the feel, that they are actually present at the event, whatever it is. I mean, whether it's in latter years, I've done outside broadcasts and whatever. I mean, you've got to have the atmosphere of the stadium, the atmosphere of the concert hall.
So it's something like Doctor Who, it hasn't got a studio audience. Is that a slightly more straightforward production to work on?
It was interesting because when I started mixing, I started on sitcoms by chance, I think. I mean, I was given sitcoms to do. Oh Brother and or Steptoes and those sort of things. And I wasn't involved much with drama. I did a couple of dramas. I mean, I didn't find them for myself particularly exciting to work on. There were people who lived and breathed sound for drama. And thankfully, I mean, the whole of life, there are people who are very happy to, I mean, there are people who are very happy nursing very poorly people at the present time. I couldn't do their job. But anyway, so I was actually just thinking, going backwards, as a gram op, I actually was the gram op on the very first series of Doctor Who, or the first episodes. It was 1965. I'm very bad with dates. Unearthly Child or something like that. And in fact, I was a trainee gram op, I think. And we did it in Studio D in Lime Grove, which is studios, which used to be old film studios owned by the BBC in Shepherd's Bush, which are no longer there. And we did a pilot episode, all in black and white. And that was fine. And it went away. And it came back as episode 1 to be done for transmission. And it's only recently, having found the original version of the pilot and the first episode that was transmitted, that the whole nature and style of the Doctor had been changed completely. In the pilot, he was very demanding, very austere, and quite a cross man. And of course, William Hartnell then, I'm the same man, but he came back, and the whole character's made much softer. And it's only, 50, however many, 60 years, 50 I suppose, years later, that I've discovered that they were so different. But yes, so I started Doctor Who then, and again, did the first series as a gram op. But then in, was it mid-70s, suddenly I was given a Doctor Who to do, which is very different from a situation comedy or a light entertainment show. In a situation comedy or light entertainment show, you have to have everything to hand, glass crashes, screams, music, blah, blah, blah. And it's almost like a theatre show. You work it through to the evening, and in the evening, the audience arrive, and it's a performance. And hopefully, you don't have many retakes, because with a live audience, they're only going to laugh once, I mean, properly. So the actors and everybody concerned really has to make the show. Doctor Who, of course, is so different because it starts in the studio, and is probably true with the location stuff that they do now. Certainly true, that it is only the dialogue from a sound point of view that is required to be picked up in the studio. That all the effects, all the music, And apart from anything that might cue an actor just to give them a reaction, nothing was played in the studio at all. So the concentration was on good dialogue, pick up any monsters, dogs, or whatever canines, could be played in just as a straight voice, without any treatment, any monsterness about them. Challenging in itself because they'd be in difficult places and hiding behind bits of set and this sort of thing, but the studio was to get the dialogue. The most exciting part was adding the music, adding the effects, adding the monster voices. And we normally had a 12-hour day because the show had been edited, all the visual effects had been added, blah, blah, blah. We were given a copy of the very plain show with just the dialogue, and 9:30 in the morning, look at the show, look through it, and incredibly boring because all it is just people chatting. And the hope always was that by 10 o'clock that night, you had a show which had children hiding behind the settee, that had excitement, it had explosions, it had dreadful monster noises. And that was really where the pleasure was with something like Doctor Who, was creating it afterwards. I mean, the Unearthly Child episode was all played in the studio because there was no dubbing in those days. I mean, that was as it was, as were Dad's Army and the similar things. What you saw is what you got in the studio. There was no dubbing. But it was just so exciting to look, because you finish the day by reviewing it with the producer and the director, and suddenly feel you've created something that really is exciting to look and watch. It's, I mean, we were helped very much by, as you know, Radiophonic Workshop, Dick Mills, Paddy Kingsland, who would write music that fitted, and Dick would often send over created effects, and we would add our own effects, blah, 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 and I would just mix the piece as a whole. The whole of, something you might not want to use, but once pictures could have time code in the bottom, which is a numbering system with the time of day and counting each frame, different people, such as a composer, such as people who might at Radiophonic Workshop want to be doing something, adding to the show, they can all look through the video, and at 10:59 and 19 frames, so-and-so happens. And it sort of joined everybody together, and we began to get machinery that could run at those specific times, rather than necessarily having to push a button exactly at the right moment. You could automate it, and so this made such a big difference, and that's how Doctor Who has progressed over the years. The technology has improved so much, and the accuracy of and the ability to make sounds and synchronize sounds. I mean, it is a totally different world from the first ones. I think that was the excitement of doing sound.
So with a drama piece, are you brought into rehearsals, or is it very much the technical run is the first time you have any idea of the production?
Yes, it was true of all television productions, whether it's a situation comedy, a drama, or Doctor Who. I mean, I always felt Doctor Who was more of a light entertainment show than a drama, because of its nature of the excitement of the noise and the effects and so on. Or if it was just a soap or whatever, actors and with the director and the producer would rehearse in a church hall somewhere. If it was a situation comedy, they would start on a Monday, and they would read through their lines. They would then mark out the floor where the set might be. The director would then direct them within that space. They would rehearse, learn their lines, and on, for sake of argument, on Thursday they should have the piece complete from their point of view, from the acting point of view. And the sound supervisor, the lighting director, the costume, any sort of technical element involved would go and watch them run through the piece, whether it was Doctor Who, whether it was a situation comedy. And that will be the first time that everybody had a chance. So from a lighting director's point of view, he would see where people were standing, he'd know where to rig lights. He and a good lighting director would also have the added problem, I mean, they all had the problem, but some were better at sorting it than the others, that because we were using booms that were going into the set, of course, if he's got a light that's going towards an artist, the boom gets in the way. And there were some magnificent lighting directors who seemed to be able to create magical pictures and still allow for this dreadful boom rushing about the set, so that we could get good sound and blah, blah, blah. And often, yes, you perhaps have to negotiate at time to time. But anyway, so at the rehearsal, everybody, I would see where the actors would want to be. Do I need one boom? Do I need two booms? Do I need to hide a microphone in a pot of flowers because I can't get a boom there? And we'd all go away and we'd organise the equipment we needed. I mean, we'd have a general idea of the staff, but we would confirm that, yes, I'd need 3 boom operators, blah, blah, blah. And then on the Friday, perhaps, or the Saturday, the show would happen. But yes, in answer to your question, yes, we've seen it before.
So in terms of your first first Doctor Who alongside Tom Baker, you had a lot of characters playing Zygons in these sort of wonderful alien costumes. Would something like that have been done again with booms, or would you have had to use sort of spot mics or radio mics for them?
Invariably, at that time, it was entirely done on booms. I mean, thinking of something like K9, then, correct me if the name's right, John Leeson, who did the voice. He actually sat in a corner of the studio and would just sit at a table with a microphone and read the lines there, and we would record those lines, but they wouldn't be treated in any way. So the artist could react with the dog, but they'd only hear it as a standard dog. No, I mean, because radio mics really only came to their fore in later years. And as you know, they do magnificent things, but they can all, particularly with costumes, they can be very, very difficult. So that if you've got a boom, you actually, many times, you haven't got clothing rustling and you haven't got muffled sound. But anyway, so booms, yes, is the answer to that one too.
And this, of course, you'd have a lot to do with, say, the director and the producer. Who were the directors that were perhaps most understanding? Because I know the likes of Douglas Camfield and Pennant Roberts were very good with actors. Were they quite so understanding from a technical point of view?
From my memory, yes. And again, because of our slight isolation, they didn't cause us much trouble, really. Yeah, there would be those that got tetchy when things went wrong, but again, that's life. You know, they are desperate to get the show done. They don't want the artist's flow of their dialogue and their mood to be destroyed because something's gone wrong technically. And again, you can understand why people do get upset. I think you just have to allow that there will be times when people will be crotchety.
What were perhaps the most challenging productions to have worked on? Because you say you've done a lot in comedy, a lot in drama, a lot of now outside broadcast. What was the most groundbreaking or challenging one?
It's difficult because they were all exciting and challenging in their own way. I mean, I did years of the Generation Game with Bruce, and then later with Jim Davison. You didn't know what was coming. You didn't know what the games were. You didn't know what the end music was. I mean, Morecambe and Wise, again, that was trying to capture, I mean, their amazing talents and the comedy that they were putting out, and the wonderful Andre Previn Christmas show, where, that was not seen until we did it. I mean, the orchestra arrived. I mean, we knew there was going to be an orchestra, but because Andre couldn't be there at any other time, he arrived and we did it. And luckily it seemed to work. I mean, it's a wonderful piece. No, I can't really pick out one from the other. They each in their own way. I mean, with the two Ronnies, Ronnie Barker was so talented and knew, as you know, wrote most of the material. and technically he was very talented as well. So you always had to be a step ahead of him in terms of thinking what he might want, because it would already be in his head. I mean, Spike Milligan, again, series of those, a totally different man in the studio because he was so focused on the comedy. And yes, I mean, you could say he was very, very difficult in the studio. Outside the studio, not. I mean, again, it's this whole emotional thing of actors which I totally understand, that when you are acting, or particularly when you're trying to produce comedy, you can't think of anything else. And why isn't this happening now? Why I have this idea. Why are these cameras trundling around? Why are people still banging lights? Why are the sound people doing this? And yes, and some naturally did get quite frustrated about it.
You won a BAFTA for your work on Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Two Ronnies. What was it that made those productions particularly special?
Do you know? I don't know. Strangely, I've been trying to sort out lots of VHS tapes, as so many people have of late, having come across stores of stuff in the house and having more time to wander around and think, what on earth was I doing there? And I was actually copying off the award ceremony for those BAFTAs, and I'd forgotten all about who the competition was. And having seen these VHS, I have no idea why I got it, because I looked at the other two and I thought three, and I thought they were very good. I mean, I don't know. I think so many of these things are being just, a whole of life is, I suppose, but just being in the right place at the right time. You know, somebody somewhere on the BAFTA committee, because yes, there was a singer whose name will come to me in a moment. There were three together, so it was three of a kind. But something must have sparked somebody's thought, and that's how it happens. I mean, to me, I didn't think they were particularly, yes, because there was one BAFTA was just for the Hitchhikers and the other was for the Two Ronnies and whatever. I don't know.
It must be nice that particularly some of your early work, things like Steptoe, Dad's Army, Lower, you know, all of these series you did a lot at the BBC have been revived on DVD. You know, new audiences are discovering them. From a sound point of view, are they any different, or is it more just the image that is perhaps being touched up a little?
We started reversioning a few of the Dad's Armies some years ago. I've forgotten what the project was for. And on some of them, we have managed to change the dreadful edit in the signature tune. But they very much, most of them are as they are. And I do find some of them horrific in terms of sound. That, I mean, when they were going out live, I had a son who was in hospital. And I remember arriving at the hospital and Dad's Army was on that particular evening. And as I walked down the corridors toward the children's ward, all I could hear were these sudden outbursts of very loud laughter that was sort of screaming down these corridors. And this was this awful sound that I produced. But people liked it, and it still seems to be very popular. But particularly by today's standards, it is very, very harsh. The great fun and sort of fulfillment of being a gram op is what you can contribute. You read through the script, and you think, oh, yeah, that would be good there, that nice bit of background. We could have a glass crash, we could have a dog bark, and until you build up very complex sort of comedy sounds, it's very much left to the gram op to create those sounds and put them in the right place. And for studio productions, of course, they are still played in, hopefully, in the right place. And because so often they are the things that will trigger a laugh as well. That somebody throwing a cricket ball, the glass crash, it gets a laugh. A couple of colleagues of mine have stayed as gram ops because they really enjoy the creativity of it. In the very early days, production would provide gramophone records and say, will you play this at this point? But it very quickly developed that you would put in what you thought until somebody said, no, I don't like that, which gives people so much input to the job. I mean, I think I only did one drama as a gram op, which was a live drama, and at one point, I only had one sound effect, I think. The very dramatic part of it, a couple of lines, and then a distant foghorn. Things used to be on 78 records with lots of bands, and I sat there for the whole production, waiting to play my foghorn, and I played it, and a horse galloped past. But I mean, that's part of life, really. And being live, that's how it was. But perhaps that's why I didn't do much drama. But it, I mean, at least on a comedy show, it would have got a laugh. But no, it's one of those jobs which is really so creative. And I mean, thinking back to Jim Davidson, he had such a good relationship with my grandma on that they almost thought of things together. So because Jim thought a lot on the spot, and often excellent track Chris would have found a piece of music that he could tell that Jim was thinking about and play it before Jim. So, yes, that's the piece. I mean, it is that sort of involvement that, and often you could calm Jim down with the right piece of music, because it would set him off on a monologue. He'd just stand on the stage and do a long, funny story, which was good for everybody because it calmed everything. But again, that was triggered by the grandma, who, you know, can only do these things at the right times. But he had the knack of always just playing the right thing at the right time to just loosen the mood, or particularly when things got a bit tense. Yes, there we are.
Well, we've touched upon so many well-known series you worked on. I think it's a lovely chance just to say thank you very much for your time, Michael. It's been a joy to talk to you about some of your work.
Well, and to you, thank you very much indeed. You can cobble it all together now. I shall leave the TARDIS.